In this brief tutorial, I'll be discussing word journals, one of several informal classroom assessment techniques that can be used as part of a formative assessment strategy for teaching and learning. In their book, The Art of Evaluation, Tara Fenwick and Jim Parsons point out that all too often, intentional focused assessment happens far too late in the learning process. An assessment of learning that attempts to measure a learner's achievement at the end of a course of study. While such assessments are necessary and valuable, these do little to help learners improve their achievement while they are still in the process of learning. What's needed, according to Fenwick and Parsons, is a form of assessment that creates a dynamic and ongoing conversation between the teacher and the learner, an assessment for learning, in which learners gain a greater sense of control over their own learning process, make better decisions about their learning, and begin to assess their own progress towards the learning goals they are trying to achieve. There are numerous techniques that can provide this kind of informal assessment for learning, many of which are described in detail by Thomas Angelo and Patricia Cross in their handbook, Classroom Assessment Techniques. These learner-centered, teacher-directed activities are designed to provide relatively quick and useful feedback to both teachers and students that can effectively aid the learning process. The specific assessment technique I'm going to discuss in this video is called a word journal. Aimed at assessing skills in synthesis and creative thinking, the word journal is best suited for those learning situations in which students are expected to read a text carefully and thoughtfully, to reflect on what's been read and perhaps consider its implications. The word journal prompts a two-part response from learners as they recollect their prior reading of a short text. In the first part of the response, the student summarizes the reading in a single word. Then, the student provides a brief explanation of why he or she chose that particular word to summarize the text. For example, at the beginning of a literature class, students could be prompted to respond to a short story that they had been assigned for reading during the previous class. Within a set time limit, each student comes up with a one-word summary of a key theme or conflict in the story, followed by an argumentative explanation that supports the validity of their assertion. What students produce is essentially an abstract or synopsis of the reading, which can help an instructor assess and improve a number of interrelated skills. First, the word journal focuses on a learner's ability to read with care and depth of understanding. Second, it assesses a learner's skill and creativity at summarizing what has been read. Finally, it assesses the learner's ability to explain and support their choice of their single-word summary. In addition to its use in literature classes, this technique can be easily adapted for use in any course or field of study that requires careful reading, especially of primary texts rather than textbooks, where the goal is understanding concepts as opposed to simply memorizing information. Yet due to the extreme condensation that's required to summarize a reading in a single word, the word journal is best used to assess the reading of short texts, such as short stories or poems, essays, articles, or even case studies. Additionally, the technique works only when students have the freedom to explore and express their own interpretations of a given text. So it's not going to be very effective in situations where there is only one acceptable way to summarize the text. With its focus on synthesis and creative thinking, the word journal addresses a wide range of teaching goals and encourages the use of higher-order thinking skills. Requiring students to read deeply and to construct meaning from what they have read, the word journal effectively promotes active learning through reading, something that's not always easy to do. Additionally, the act of choosing a single word to sum up a reading and then explaining and advocating for that word encourages students to first make a personal connection with the text they are reading and then take responsibility for their ideas. Consistent practice with this assessment tool helps students develop the ability to write highly condensed abstracts and to chunk large amounts of information for more effective storage in long-term memory, skills that are useful in nearly any field or profession. To effectively use this technique, instructors should expect a significant investment of time and energy to prepare, explain, execute, analyze, and discuss the activity. As already mentioned, the technique is most effective when used with short readings that offer room for interpretation. An instructor should decide which aspect of the text she wants the students to focus on, main theme, for example, or central conflict or problem or issue, and she should make this clear to the learners before using the assessment. Before the assessment begins, the instructor should spend some time coming up with her own list of reasonable summary words, as well as a few different kinds of analyses and arguments that she hopes students will offer. She should keep in mind that students who have never practiced this kind of highly compressed summarizing are likely to find the task extremely challenging, so the instructor should be prepared to meet with some resistance. Emphasizing that the specific choice of word is less significant than the explanation that supports that choice will likely alleviate some of these student concerns, as well as produce more significant responses. As the instructor collects and reads the journals, she should keep track of the words that are used by more than one student, or of related terms as they appear. She should also pay attention to the forms of justification that are used, as well as the explanations given. After analyzing the responses, perhaps categorizing them by the summary words or by the types of explanations offered, the instructor could select examples of 3 or 4 approaches to share with the class. Jacqueline Mangieri, an online instructor and curriculum developer, suggests using a word cloud app such as Wordle to visually display the collected responses. It's important to keep in mind that students will benefit most from the assessment technique when they have adequate opportunity to discuss and compare their responses. In fact, Angelo and Cross recommend adapting the assessment for use as a small group activity, encouraging students to share their journals with one another and analyze the strengths and weaknesses of each student's approach. Obviously, with such an emphasis on discussion, the word journal isn't an appropriate assessment tool if the anonymity of the learners is an issue. Establishing some simple guidelines around respectful group discussion, however, will likely address most student concerns around anonymity. So, while the word journal is perhaps a little more complex and requires a little more effort than many other classroom assessment techniques, it can be fairly effective in developing skills in remembering, summarizing, analyzing, and communicating ideas and information, skills that students will find necessary to both academic and professional life. And to read more about this and other informal classroom assessment techniques, I'd encourage you to check out the source material that I've used to prepare this video. Thanks for watching.